Leo, look at this graph. The top 1% holds more wealth than the entire bottom 50%. How is that defensible?
Welcome back to Fluent Talk, everyone. I'm Leo, and that clearly is Ava, trying to start a revolution before the microphones are even on. Welcome back, Ava, but that graph is exactly what we're talking about today: global systems and inequality.
It is. We're starting with wealth inequality. Is it a bug in the system or an unavoidable feature of capitalism? I argue it's a systemic failure.
Wealth inequality is the natural and necessary outcome of a functioning capitalism, Ava. It rewards risk and innovation. It's what drives the economy forward. It's not a failure. It's the result of successful social mobility for some.
That idea of social mobility is a myth for most. The vast majority are trapped by the structure. Capitalism might be efficient at creating wealth, but it's fundamentally flawed in its distribution.
You keep using the phrase systemic failure. For our advanced English learners, can you elaborate what specific part of the system is failing?
The systemic failure is that the rules of the game, taxes, education, labor laws, are designed to benefit capital over labor. It makes it impossible for the poor to gain meaningful social mobility.
We're already using heavy terms like systemic failure and social mobility. Stick around to the end of the episode to get the full list of today's essential vocabulary. You don't want to miss our recap.
I disagree. The system is flawed, yes, but it's still the engine of progress. The solution isn't to dismantle capitalism, it's to refine it. Innovation is the real key to solving wealth inequality. Innovation doesn't matter if you can't afford a home. We need to focus on fixing the distribution now. Speaking of innovation and distribution, let's move on to a very divisive financial topic: cryptocurrency and finance. Innovation doesn't matter if you can't afford a home. We need to focus on fixing the distribution now. Speaking of innovation and distribution, let's move on to a very divisive financial topic: cryptocurrency and finance.
I love this topic. Crypto is the ultimate escape hatch from centralized control. Decentralization is key. It removes the middleman, the banks, the government, giving power back to the individual.
That sounds like a marketing slogan, Leo. I see it as a wildly volatile, speculative bubble. It's unregulated, risky, and serves mostly as a way for the wealthy to gamble rather than providing financial services for the unbanked.
Ugh. Did you hear that? Sorry about that little static burst. Maybe the system is reacting to the word volatility. But seriously, the volatility is a feature of a new emerging asset class, not a bug.
That level of volatility is why we need fiat currency backed by sovereign governments. Crypto might promise decentralization, but the massive crashes prove it's too risky to replace traditional finance.
But the underlying technology, the blockchain, is the revolution. It's immutable, transparent, and solves the trust problem. The actual currency is just the first application of decentralization. We're using cutting-edge financial terms. If you don't know the difference between blockchain and fiat currency, stay with us until the very end. We will define decentralization and volatility in the summary segment.
The reality is that until the extreme volatility is controlled and there is clearer accountability, crypto will remain a speculative bubble, a playground for risk takers, not a stable currency for the global economy.
The market will regulate itself eventually. Speaking of government and the economy, next let's look at a policy idea that promises to solve the problems of automation and inequality: universal basic income. UBI. The market will regulate itself eventually. Speaking of government and the economy, next let's look at a policy idea that promises to solve the problems of automation and inequality: universal basic income.
UBI is no longer a fringe idea, Leo. It's a necessity. As automation eliminates jobs across all sectors, providing a universal basic income will be the only way to prevent mass poverty and economic collapse.
Sorry, these topics are heavy, but seriously, Leo, what happens when robots take half the jobs? UBI provides a safety net, allowing people to retrain or pursue non-market work.
The idea of universal basic income is incredibly expensive and dangerously flawed. It removes the incentive for labor participation. Why would people work when they get paid to do nothing? It would crash the entire welfare state.
Studies and pilot programs show that recipients of UBI do not stop working. They use the time to study, start small businesses, or simply stabilize their lives. The fear that people will become lazy is outdated capitalism dogma.
But what about the logistics? Funding UBI requires massive tax increases, which punishes the workers who are participating in the labor force. The term welfare state already implies a huge commitment. UBI is too radical a shift.
We're using crucial policy and economic vocabulary. If you don't know the difference between UBI and the welfare state, stay with us until the very end. We will define automation and labor participation in the summary segment.
UBI is an investment in human potential, not a drain on the welfare state. As long as automation is advancing, we need to fund pilot programs to prepare for a future where traditional labor participation is no longer the norm.
Perhaps. The debate is about economic efficiency versus ethical safety nets. Speaking of massive ethical dilemmas, next let's tackle one of the most divisive social and political issues globally: global migration ethics.
Perhaps. The debate is about economic efficiency versus ethical safety nets. Speaking of massive ethical dilemmas, next let's tackle one of the most divisive social and political issues globally: global migration ethics.
Global migration is an ethical imperative. When people are fleeing war or climate disaster, closing borders is morally indefensible. The rights of the asylum seeker must always supersede issues of national sovereignty.
That position ignores reality, Ava. Every nation has a fundamental duty to protect its citizens and its national sovereignty. Uncontrolled global migration places immense strain on resources and creates security vulnerabilities.
But the argument that migrants are a burden is proven false by data. I was reading a report. I think the number was something like, I can't recall the exact percentage, but developing nations often benefit greatly from the economic activity of new arrivals.
It's all right, skip the exact number. But let's look at the emotional argument. When large-scale migration occurs, it often fuels xenophobia, which destabilizes the host country. We need structured immigration, not simply open borders, to manage the refugee crisis.
Xenophobia is an issue of ignorance, not a failure of migration policy. You cannot use the existence of bigotry as an excuse to deny basic human rights to the asylum seeker. Governments have a duty to educate, not to build walls.
We're using crucial political and social vocabulary. If you want to articulate your opinion on the refugee crisis and national sovereignty, stay with us until the end. We will define global migration and xenophobia in the summary segment. Ultimately, every nation must find a balance between national sovereignty and humanitarian duty. The solution lies in fair, efficient policy that deters illegal border crossing while protecting the genuine asylum seeker.
The conversation must always center on the human cost. Speaking of cost and ethics, let's move to a dilemma where profit often dictates survival: Big Pharma ethics. The conversation must always center on the human cost. Speaking of cost and ethics, let's move to a dilemma where profit often dictates survival: Big Pharma ethics.
This is a simple business reality, Ava. Big Pharma needs to charge high prices because of intellectual property protection. That protection isn't greed. It's the only way to fund the billions in research and development required for the next breakthrough drug.
That argument lacks any ethical mandate. When a drug is life-saving, its drug pricing should not be dictated by profit margins. The prioritization should be public health, not shareholder returns. It's morally bankrupt to let people die because they can't afford medicine.
But you can't have public health without research. If you take away the incentive, if you strip away the intellectual property...
Wait, let me finish my thought, please. You are arguing for a system that monetizes human suffering. The vast majority of basic scientific research is funded by government grants, taxpayer money. Therefore, Big Pharma has an obligation to prioritize global public health over exorbitant drug pricing.
Even with government grants, the final, incredibly expensive trials and the massive failure rate must be covered. If Big Pharma cannot guarantee a reasonable return on investment through intellectual property, they will simply stop researching rare diseases. That is the pragmatic, cold truth of how innovation works.
The conflict is clear. Your definition of pragmatism is my definition of institutional cruelty. This debate highlights the massive gap between capitalism and a functioning public health system. We've covered some serious vocabulary. If you want to understand the true complexities of intellectual property, big pharma, and ethical mandate, stay with us until the very end. We'll define all the key terms in our vocabulary summary.
It's the ultimate ethical dilemma, balancing the free market with human life. That tension perfectly summarizes all our debates on global systems and inequality today. Now, let's move on to our final segment.
It's the ultimate ethical dilemma, balancing the free market with human life. That tension perfectly summarizes all our debates on global systems and inequality today. Now, let's move on to our final segment.
Exactly. This is your essential list of terms to help you master these complex topics. Listen closely and practice using them this week.
First, wealth inequality. This refers to the unequal distribution of assets and income among a population. Example, the growing wealth inequality is a concern for many governments.
Next, systemic failure. This is the breakdown or inadequacy of an entire structure or system, not just an individual part. Example, many argue the housing crisis was a systemic failure.
Third, decentralization. This is the transfer of control or power from a single central authority to local areas or individual users. Example, blockchain technology relies on decentralization.
Fourth, universal basic income, or UBI. This is a policy providing all citizens with a regular, unconditional sum of money from the state. Example, UBI is being tested in pilot programs worldwide.
Fifth, global migration. This is the movement of people across international borders for settlement, often due to economic or political reasons. Example, global migration is changing the demographics of Europe.
Sixth, xenophobia. This is the intense or irrational dislike or fear of people from other countries. Example, the rise in xenophobia often coincides with economic recessions.
And finally, Big Pharma. This refers to the large global pharmaceutical industry, particularly concerning its commercial and political power. Example, drug pricing policies are heavily influenced by Big Pharma.
What an intense set of debates. Thank you for challenging your beliefs with us today.
Our final question for you. Do you believe the high prices charged by Big Pharma are justified because of the need for innovation? Or is it an ethical failure? Let us know your arguments in the comments below.
Remember to hit that subscribe button. We post a brand new episode with fresh debates and more essential vocabulary every single day at 6 a.m. on the English Easy channel.
We'll see you next time. Bye for now.